Welcome, everybody, to the Crown Lane podcast, Crown Lane on the Record. Today, we're doing our part 2 of our Access in the Industry. Our part 1 was with the lovely Miss Jackie and John Kelly, and we were looking at the side of the music industry. Today, we're looking at the other side. We're looking at television, we're looking at radio, we're looking at writing, and I'm very lucky to be sat down with wonderful Kerry Burnell. Hi, Kerry.
Hi. So we're looking at the dark side today. You've looked at the bright side.
We're looking at all the music. Yeah, now.
And this is the truth.
Yeah,
yes.
Right, here we go, yeah. Thank you very much for coming down to Crown Lane.
My pleasure.
You, I guess, are a newer member of the Crown Lane family, the extended universe of Crown Lane.
Yes, I am. I didn't know that you existed until this year, actually,
Yes.
when I came in to record a radio drama.
Yes.
Directed by Nikki Wilding. And I just couldn't believe this lovely oasis, this hub of welcome and inclusion and warmth. And I remember my first morning when I got here, you know, it's January, it's freezing. God, it's awful. And it was horrible weather. And I was, trying to find the studio on like Google Maps. And I just saw this coffee shop and I thought, okay, well, I'm almost there. This looks lovely. This looks like the beacon of niceness of the high street. I'm going in there and then I'll find where to go.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise that actually...
Oh, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
The studio backs onto the coffee shop. And as soon as I got into the coffee shop, I was like, oh, this is so soothing.
Yeah.
And it's got like a lovely board of like, lovely stuff that's coming up in the week. Time to talk or book club on Wednesdays or, I don't know what the things are. But it just felt like coming in and having a warm hug or
that's nice.
Coming in from the cold and just sort of centering.
Yes.
And then, of course, I had to go to work.
Yeah. And we didn't pay you to say any of that either, so thanks very much for being so lovely.
I spend a lot of time in coffee shops writing. So I'm always on the lookout for like lovely coffee shops.
Yeah.
And yes, yours is, you're slightly far for me to come to just work for an afternoon writing. But I think there's something really special about having a very welcoming atmosphere and also lovely coffee and cakes.
Well, we try and do
helps.
that. We try, and everybody who works in Metronome and Crown Lane, they're just nice people as well, which really helps out. I'm going to embarrass myself slightly because when you came in to do your radio drama, there were quite a few people here throughout the days that you were here, the actors and director.
Well, there were loads of people, and someone came in and said to me, "Oh yeah, great, okay," and started this conversation with me, and I thought they think I'm someone else.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh," and they were like, "Okay, so when's Lizzie arriving or something?" So I don't know. And aren't you with the record label? And I said, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not with the record label. No.
But with all those people there, John came up to me in the office and he said, "Do you know who that is out there?" I went, "No." And he said,
"But why would you?"
"Well, because why wouldn't I?"
Well, but your kids are quite young, aren't they? They're under 5. So
yes.
I left the CBeebies house 7 years ago, I think. So you would have missed.
No, but I didn't because a lot of
you worked in special needs.
A lot of my background is with SCN and working in schools and head of music. So
CBeebies is big news in those environments.
Often quite on. So you were normally around once a week. You'd appear in my classroom. You see. You didn't get an appearance fee for it either.
Here she is.
Yeah, exactly.
Ting.
So there was a bit of, oh yes, carry that. I was trying to play a bit cool. Oh, you're right. How are you doing? You're enjoying your time at the studio. Anyway, it's been lovely then having you back to the studio, and thank you very, very much for then coming on to our lovely podcast.
No, it's fine because I forget that people. I mean, CBeebies is such a beloved brand, and I forget that people still have a memory of that, and also. Yeah, obviously I look different off camera. I look, like a woman in her 40s is quite tired, is just trying to struggle through the day.
That's what I look like as well.
Yes, definitely. That's what I thought when I met you. Here's another woman in their 40s.
Oh, I'm so glad.
But and then on camera, it's the magic of telly. You look youthful and vibrant and ready for an enchanting day. So, I forget that I expect people not to recognise me.
Yeah.
But yes, when I walked in, John did give me a really big smile. And I thought, oh, he's so friendly and lovely.
Yeah.
And then after about 2 minutes, I thought, oh, no.
Yes, because his boys definitely...
Yes, they were
of
right
that
in
group.
the time zone.
After he gave you that big smile, but about a minute later would have been when it knock on the office door. Look who's out there.
Well, the thing is, it's his studio, so I just didn't know if he was... And he's a lovely guy. I just didn't know if he was really friendly and welcoming to everyone.
Well... Oh, I don't know what I should say now.
Which I'm sure that he is.
He is.
But I think there's a kind of... It's like a strange look people get in their eyes.
Yeah.
It's like a nostalgia.
Yeah.
Where they're remembering, I think, those really special and or difficult and or moments of exhaustion that they've had with young children when CBeebies was a bit of a lifeline of peace or distraction or learning or... Oh, I don't have to do the bedtime story because Kerry's doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that kind of thing. And people have such a kind of deep, heartfelt fondness of those memories. But then also, I think sometimes people get very disappointed when I'm not singing and
swearing at
and
them
jolly.
on a bus.
Yeah, exactly. That it's that kind of... I mean, it doesn't happen so much anymore. But certainly there were times where I'd be stopped in the street, up to 5 or 6 times a day, which, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But if you give time to every single person, then that kind of turns into quite a big thing.
Yeah.
And people often wanted photos. And I also had a daughter who would have been with me when I wasn't at work. Was a solo parent. I'm a solo parent, so she would have been with me. She's dual heritage. She's mixed race. You've met her. Beautiful, fabulous, colourful plaits. And when she was little, for one reason or another, people often didn't realise that she was my daughter. Yeah. They just thought she was another kid who wanted an autograph.
Yeah.
So she would be like moved out of the way.
Yeah, move along, you've had your turn.
And it's like, no, you need to.
Yeah.
So,
wow,
sometimes
bad.
I'd have to be a bit stern. So I'd say like 70% of people who've met me have had their dream come true. And they're like, oh, she was like the Christmas fairy. And the other 30 were like, oh my God.
I can't believe it.
What a nerve. And that, I'm sorry to those people, but that is just the rhythm of life.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
People, that's, I suppose, the truth about celebrity is that we are just people. I mean, I wouldn't even call myself a celebrity, but I mean, in the broader sense, the way people get sort of sucked in by the culture of celebrity.
Yeah.
And I think everyone thinks, once you're kind of successful at one thing, you're living like a Kardashian or...
Yeah. And maybe that attitude of, because I know you owe me something back,
well, also,
of niceness.
I think it's when it's for your child as well, and people feel like this would make such a difference to their child's life, and perhaps it would. Sometimes I'm sure it would. Other times, people. I've been in a supermarket and had a row of parents like blocking the exit.
Oh wow!
So I couldn't leave because they were like, "You've got to have a photo with Jimmy," and Jimmy's asleep.
Yeah.
In a pushchair.
They couldn't care.
No, doesn't know who I am.
Yeah.
But I think it's that thing about. But, because if you see someone, like, let's say I went into the coffee shop and Reese Witherspoon was in the coffee shop and I'd be like, oh my God, it's Reese, and I just want to hug her. But there'd be a level of kind of control, I hope, that would come into play. And I just, I'd have to say something, but I'd be like, oh, Reese, I really admire you as an artist. And, I wouldn't be like, I've got to have a photo with you or I'll die,
Would you push her daughter out the way so you could get in closer?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't.
Nice.
No, but it's that thing of, sorry, that's just really reminded me of a hilarious story that Simon Pegg told me when he came in to do the CBeebies bedtime story.
Yeah.
And he is just exactly who he is.
Yeah.
in all of his films. He's just absolutely lovely, so down to earth. It's like he doesn't even realise he's famous.
Yeah.
And so he was on a train once, and I think he had headphones on. Someone came up to him and said, "Can I have an autograph? Or can I have a photo?" And he didn't hear them. So he said, "Oh, no, thank you."
Oh, no.
Offering him a drink. And the person just looked at him really confused and walked on. It was only later when he processed it.
It must
he
have
was
seemed
like,
quite harsh, like quite dismissive. Almost.
"Oh, no, thanks."
Yeah,
But
I'm fine. Thanks.
He was so nice about it that they sort of didn't know
Don't know
what to do.
Yeah. Right. Well, just for those who don't know Cerrie.
Yes.
So,
which is probably most people.
Writer.
Yes.
Presenter.
Yes.
Actress. Both.
Not so much anymore, but certainly.
Well, I don't know. I was looking at your IMDb before you came in. Receptionist on EastEnders, I saw.
I know. And congratulations to EastEnders who've just turned 40.
Yeah.
That was a gorgeous show to be on. They were brilliant. And all soaps or continuing dramas have had a tendency, they've been ahead of time, really, in the casting of disabled actors.
Right, okay.
Really, since the 80s, that and children's. So, institutions like Grange Hill.
Yeah.
I think the time for authentic storytelling is now. Mm-hmm. And also, I think soaps are kind of leading the way in giving agency to disabled actors in terms of owning the script and making it their own.
Mm-hmm.
Because what used to happen is that and I can talk about this in some detail later, but you'd turn up, you'd obviously have your lived experience, you'd be given the script, the character, and someone would have researched your disability for an hour and sort of threaded that into the character quite loosely.
Yeah.
So then there'd be this real juxtaposition of, okay, but that's not that would never happen, or that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you'll have I'll give you an example. So two actually very different examples. One from the beginning of my career, and one from more recently, which wasn't as positive but did turn around. So the first one was an audition for Grange Hill. But this is not when I was a child. This is when I was 27 or something. And they contacted me and they said, we want you to come to Liverpool for this audition. And I said, okay, great. What's the character? And they said, amputee. And I said, but what's the character's name? Amputee.
Yeah, no, we haven't thought that yet.
And I said, right, you do know I'm not an amputee, though. And they were like, it says that you've got one hand. Yeah, but I'm not an amputee. I was born with one hand.
Yeah.
And, the person on the other end, they're probably 22 or something.
Yeah,
they're like, well, we've been told to book you for an audition. I said, okay, that's fine. Send me the script. So they sent me the script and I read it. And the character was for a 50-year-old man who was the head teacher of the school, a new head teacher who comes in, has one hand and a prosthetic hand.
Yeah.
And there was just this kind of pantomime-esque, I don't know who would have found it funny. I found it really offensive, sort of comedy of errors all around the prosthetic hand. Like someone goes to shake the hand and it comes off, it falls off in assembly. Just all of this weirdness about the prosthetic, and then other scenes with pupils trying to imagine how the head teacher lost their hand, and I can see how I can see what they were going for, but also I just don't think that anyone had thought about the effect that might have on a child with an upper limb difference watching it, or an adult, or a parent.
Yeah.
Because what you're essentially doing is opening the floodgates up for other kids at school, and a lot of people were watching Grange Hill at that time. It was still really popular. To then say to someone that they know who's got that disability, to make fun of them or laugh at them or be cruel, or even in a well-meaning way, try and be sort of jovial and get it wrong.
Did that go ahead? That
So I went to the audition and I read the part. I did it as me, obviously not 50-year-old man. And then I said in the audition, why does the character have a prosthetic? And they said, because they're an amputee. And I said, how many amputees do you know? And the room went really quiet. It's about 6 people in the room. And I was a completely unknown actor. I'd been the receptionist on EastEnders.
Oh, yes, I saw an IMDb.
And I said, because I know quite a lot and prosthetics are quite problematic and people tend to not use them unless it's a very specific thing, to play golf or, go sailing or whatever. And the room they were all kind of like, yep, we'll get back to you. And I left and I thought, oh God, I've ruined it. I should have tried to get the job and then spoken up. But actually, quite a bit of time went by, 2 weeks went by. And then I got a phone call out of the blue, really. And they said, we loved what you said, the points that you raised in the audition, and we've cut that character completely.
Oh, wow.
Based on what you said. And we want to create a whole new character based on you. Tell us about your life. Go.
Wow.
And they had half an hour to tell them who I was. And they created a new character who I think was in 4 episodes.
Yeah.
Called Miss Green. And that was just one of the best experiences on set that I had ever had at that point and also have ever had.
Yeah.
Even now, 20 years later, or I think 17 years later. Because what they would do is send me the scripts ahead of time so that I could read them.
Yeah. And
they didn't just send me, sort of my scenes to advise on. They would send me the whole episode and they would say, any time any character mentions you, we want you to edit and advise. So really then I was in a sort of script advisor role.
Yeah.
Which just wasn't the way things were usually done. Actors just weren't usually given that much freedom or agency. But they just had an amazing way of trusting their cast. And I was really included in the whole production and just treated with so much care and respect, actually.
What a turnaround as well.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that to end that way, because John and Jackie, in the last episode we were talking about, so one of the things that Jackie said was that all she wants to do is be a musician. Society has kind of put so much more on her plate that her workload goes up massively with the organisation of her life and everything, all the access side of what she needs to...
And the transport and the accessible hotels.
So there's already so much more, and that just thinking about you going along to that, and also I think it's amazing to then put your foot down in the way that you did at the beginning.
I just didn't have a choice, actually.
Yeah.
I did have a choice, but I didn't.
Because I feel that some
really...
people end up taking that path of least resistance. Not that it's a bad thing to do that necessarily, in no
I'm
judgment.
all about that now in my 40s, so just give me the easiest path. That's all I want.
Give me the 50-year-old headmaster.
Yes.
I'll do it now. Where's that prop?
Yes.
But to do that, because there's a risk then, isn't there, that you're in an industry where you might immediately be branded as, the troublesome one, that person's making a fuss. You can see why some people might not want to ever speak up like that. So
that didn't really cross my mind. It was more that I wouldn't get the part.
Yeah.
But I think I'd already taken that risk is sort of all my life in a way, in that I stopped wearing a prosthetic when I was 9.
Yeah.
After a really long battle, like probably a 7-year battle with my parents, and then also with the doctors saying that, I didn't, sort of consistently refusing to wear it and having it enforced. And then one day when I was 9, it just kind of, it was my dad, actually. My dad used to work in London, very sort of typical 80s. He'd be off in London all day working, and my mum was a dance teacher, so she would work during the school day or sometimes at night. But he had the day off to go to the dentist or something, and he drove past the school and he saw me running around the playground dragging the hand behind me.
Yeah.
and then sort of carrying it under my arm.
Yeah.
And he just thought, oh my God, she's 9. She's still not wearing it.
Yeah.
You know, I'd wear it in the lessons and that was it. I wouldn't wear it for PE. I wouldn't wear it at lunchtime. I wouldn't wear it after school or at the weekends.
Yeah.
And then I think, you know, my mum had probably felt all of those things and she'd be the one taking me to the hospital. But she, you know, you're being advised that this is the best thing to do. So you listen to that advice and you persevere, and people are saying things like, well, how will she drive if she does, you know, all of that, which is absolute crap. But when it's fed to you and you're the parent, of course you absorb it and you try and do it. But then I think when my dad turned round and went, is this necessary? She probably said, no, it's not. Let's just not do it.
Yeah.
So then it stopped when I was 9. Then when I went back to drama school, I went to Manchester Met, and in my second year, it kind of felt out of the blue, but I suppose it wasn't from their point of view, you know, that sort of all of the tutors, the main 4 of them, as a united front, said to me in different ways, you're going to have to wear a prosthetic or you're not going to work. Like, you know, you ought to wear it for the final year. And there was part of me that felt like, well, okay, it's like putting on a costume, it's like wearing a wig. But actually, it's not that. It's much more than that. It's saying, it's like asking someone with alopecia to wear a wig against their will.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like saying, there's so much nuanced and layered ableism within it. Because actually, you know, none of the prosthetics I had, and I had about 20 different ones, none of them actually helped me do anything. They all restricted me. You know, that was the ironic truth.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, it was just like having a piece of Tupperware on the end of your arm.
Right, yeah.
But you couldn't even store tea in it. You know, it was sort of no good. And it was too, you know, I had a doctor say to me, but if you don't wear it, the other children won't like it. So again, it was like, let's manage the other children's expectations.
Let's make sure everyone else is okay first.
Yeah, let's make sure that they don't have to deal with your arm.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I remember I wasn't affected by that. I think I was 7. I remember laughing and saying, oh no, you don't know my friends. You know, they're always like cutting the fingers off it, pulling it off.
Yeah.
You know, they're not frightened. They go to school with me every day. They're not frightened of my arm.
Yeah.
That's I mean, I didn't say this when I was 7, but like, you know, that's his adult perception of actually what the lived experience of having an upper limb difference is. And it's actually very different to what the reality is, which is just that kids get on with it after about 10 minutes, whatever your difference is.
Yeah.
Everyone just has to muck in and go and do PE in a freezing cold gym room, you know, in plimsolls. And so that's what we all did.
Well, that kind of naturally leads to another point that I wanted to try and bring up, which is this first half of what we're talking about in the podcast was sort of experiences that you've had within the industry for better or worse, and maybe how things might have changed. One of the things, and again, I've apologised, I think, 3 times already before I've even asked this, because I know that it's a subject that you've been asked about before and stuff like that, but I just wanted to hear it with you talking about, obviously, when you started at CBeebies, there was, I don't know how you would describe it, almost a controversy that happened.
Like a furore or you know, like a sort of a whirlwind of press and complaints and intrigue and interviews and then it swung back the other way. Yeah,
and for those who don't know, that it was the main sort of tabloid headliney version of it is that parents were suggesting that their children were scared.
Yes, I think the headline was "Disabled Presenter Scares Children." Which would be really useful if it was true.
Yeah,
you know,
so
it's time to go to bed now. You know,
get out, get them up.
That would have been a completely different angle for the
corridor. But my question is, because I have I have an opinion on this from my experience with working with young people as well. But in a nutshell, Well, you kind of said it already. Is it young people having that attitude, or is it adults projecting onto young people? How was it for you? What was your experience of it? What's your takeaway?
In terms of CBeebies, the viewers are very young, so it's largely a preschool channel.
Yeah.
So you're talking about children under 3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really varied. The majority of children wouldn't necessarily notice. Or if they did notice, they would notice in the same way that they might notice a dragon or a talking pig.
Yeah.
You know, it's just sort of everything's new to them.
Yeah.
So within that, and actually there would have been older siblings watching it as well. But within that kind of precious bubble of early years, there might have been some children who were frightened because it's different. It was the first time that a children's channel had put a presenter with an upper limb difference, or one hand, as I would, refer to myself, where I wasn't a Paralympian, I wasn't telling an inspirational life story, I wasn't a villain. I was just a woman in a lovely, colourful house having a tea cake. You know? And also we gave no explanation, why would you?
Yeah.
You don't say, here's Alex, he's Welsh.
Yeah.
It just, there's no reason for it. So we just said, this is Cerrie and Alex and here they are. And what happened is there were 9 complaints made by parents where they had written on an anonymous message board saying, not Mumsnet, but that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Saying things like, yes, my child's scared. Well, so's mine. Well, yes, mine is as well. And then there were loads of people saying, honestly, I don't know what you're talking about. But, there were 9. But if you think about it, in the UK, 9 people.
Yeah.
I don't know what the viewing figures were for CBeebies at that time, but, they were much higher than, like, I don't know, not 9 million, but.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been that far away, surely.
No. So I think, 2 things can be true at the same time. The majority of people either didn't notice or were really grateful.
Yeah.
Some people noticed and the children may have been, I don't know, concerned or scared. But those parents perhaps had the kind of emotional literacy to say, oh, it's all right, she's just got a different arm, that's all, or she was born with one hand, or, well, everyone's different, your cousins, whatever.
Yeah.
Then in some families, there would have been cases where the parents don't know how to deal with that, and they don't want to be inconvenienced by having to have a conversation about disability. Yeah. I mean, I remember one person had said, I don't mind disability, but I don't want to have to talk about it at 9 a.m. And it's like, okay,
wow.
Well, sorry about that. And then of course, there are households where unfortunately there is a lot of ableism and there is a very outdated view.
Yeah.
But, honestly, people got over it very quickly. Within 3 months, it had died down, and there was never any anxiety from myself or from the channel about what that meant. And actually, the inpouring of support and positivity and the opportunity to have a far more detailed conversation about disability and the way that prejudice actually works, which is that people don't really admit it and don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
And, even on the message boards, everyone was anonymous. So it's a kind of whispered prejudice, but it does still exist in people's minds. And actually that those people did me a brilliant favour in a way, because it was a springboard into the spotlight, which I wouldn't have had without that.
Yeah.
And I was then able to talk about, give advice on the conversations that you can have with a young child. And also, some kids are scared of spiders, some kids are scared of a dark. It's all right for a child to be scared. That's fine. You explain and then we move on. And I never would ever it wouldn't even occur to me to take those kind of comments personally.
Yeah.
Because I've grown up with one hand.
Yeah.
So, and I went to one of the biggest primary schools in Europe. It was a 6th class entry.
Yeah, wow.
So it was a huge school. And having been a child and an adult with one hand, there's nothing that I haven't dealt with or heard.
Yeah.
So other people not liking my arm, well, that's their business. That's not really my business or my problem. I think it's more about that sort of educational piece of understanding that those prejudices aren't ever personal, in fact. And so, it operates in a similar way to racism. It's never about who the person is. It's more that someone's uncomfortable with their identity for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Or homophobia or, transphobia. It's not that they know that person and have taken a particular dislike to them. It's that they are uncomfortable in their own soul, in their own understanding of the world.
Yeah.
So, that disability or that identity triggers something within them. So, they need to go and have some therapy or
which is a lot more difficult to find in children and young people, I think. My example of that is that within the schools that I've worked in before, if we'd ever go out and about or to the theatre or whatever we're doing out in the community, I was working with a young person once who had a really, really, really extreme disfigurement on their face. That was very, very noticeable, beautiful young person. And whenever we'd be out and about, occasionally children
would say stuff.
Well, it wasn't even that. It would be like they'd notice, definitely. And I think an immediate thing is, that's different.
Or just a gasp. Or staring.
But then immediately, fine. And it was always the difficulty, and then me having to be the responsible adult with adults, other members of the public who would quite rudely be staring or ask a question, is that person okay? That kind of thing. Yeah, and you'd have to be like...
They're not okay and we need a lot of champagne. That would make it better.
But I always found that it was always the adults who were the worst behaved with it, and younger people, especially young children, out and about in, the Kingston Bental Centre, wherever we were, they just didn't care. They didn't really show much.
It's really varied. I mean, I go into schools a lot and do a lot of work in schools, and sometimes children... I'm often talking about my books. Let's say it's the Unicorn Seeker series. And so then, they'll notice and there might be a kind of, oh, look at her arm, or, that kind of thing. And then within, I'm very quick to say, has anyone ever seen a unicorn?
Yeah.
And then straight away, they're like, oh, she's the unicorn lady.
Yeah.
And actually, we have a discussion about it at the end of the session. I'm not getting into it in the beginning because that would completely... set us off on the wrong track from talking about the book. Yeah. And by the time they've been with me for 45 minutes, they're kind of like, why have you got one arm? And I'm like, well, one hand, and I was born like it. Okay, have you got a cat? It's just, they're kind of, they're just children and they're curious. Yeah. And you're right. I think the real issues are with the adult community, but again, sometimes it can be well-meaning, sometimes it can be well-meaning and patronizing. Yeah. Sometimes it is just that people have grown up in a household where that kind of speech was okay. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I mean, that's what I love about London and big cities, is that I feel like there's a sense of belonging, whoever you are. You're not, I mean, I don't even feel like I'm ever stared at, or even, I don't think anyone even notices I've got one hand in London. Yeah. But during my teenage years, I lived in a small seaside town, and that felt a lot more, I mean, the teenage years are, you're under a magnifying glass of your own making in a way, aren't you? Yeah. That felt that felt uncomfortable, and that was problematic and dark, I would say.
As it is for most teenagers.
Yes.
And I imagine, slightly amplified.
I think, amplified by A, having a disability, B, being into drama, and C, being in a small town.
Yeah.
You know, all
the trio.
of those things. Yes.
Tick, tick, tick.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, okay. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take our little break and then we'll come back and we'll continue. So back in a moment.
Passionate about podcasts and sound? Dive into the Sculpt Mixing course. Developed over 2 years, this online course delivers top-tier mixing tips straight from our bustling commercial studio. With guided videos, downloadable audio content and a comprehensive handbook, you'll elevate your skills at your own pace. Visit crownlanestudio.co.uk/education and enter podcast special at checkout for an exclusive 30% discount. At Crown Lane, we help you sound better. Download now and let's get back to the episode.
Welcome back, everybody. We were just talking. I think Kerry and I got a bit carried away. I certainly was just listening, absolutely loving it. But you actually did mention that there was 2 points that you were going to make.
Yes. So, the experience I had on Grange Hill was really wonderful, really nurturing, and very sort of futuristic in their approach, actually.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing. How you explained that.
Yes. Completely. And it was really sort of unheard of. Now, it is starting to happen a lot more in that, you know, they're really trying to, and I know this, or I noticed this a lot when I went back to the BBC for a year to be their ambassador for disability about 2 years, maybe 3 years ago now. And that was really interesting to be on the other side of the camera and to be speaking to, producers and casting directors and also independent, indies who are making the content. And there's a real drive for authentic storytelling. And of course, the way that you get authentic storytelling is you have to change the storyteller. So now there's far more of a hunger for disabled storylines written by people with the lived experience of disability. Now, it might not be identical to the character, but there's certainly, if you have any disability, you have an empathy to what the trajectory of life with a disability is. You might not know the specifics, but what they try and do is they match, if you've got a character, for instance, who is paraplegic, they would try and find someone, a writer who is paraplegic. If they couldn't find specifically that, they would look for a wheelchair user with limited mobility. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. And then you come to the casting. And so then you're looking for an actor who shares that lived experience. And that's where it's so important that we really honour and cherish and cast disabled talent in the roles that are created for us. You cannot be CGIing things on or off, or asking people to sit in a chair. It's just not. It's not acceptable anymore. Yeah. And I will fight you if I see you doing it.
Because it's not like there's no gifted and talented actors from. There's so many.
Huge amount of them. There's a whole untapped industry, really. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about Sex Education. They did such a beautiful love story between two characters, Maeve, who was like the kind of strong, sassy girl, and Isaac, beautiful, beautiful actor, wheelchair user, paraplegic, and it was just so beautifully filmed when they were dating and they came to share like an intimate moment together in a caravan. And it just the tenderness and the care and the way that they really leaned into his point of view. As a young man, exploring sex, and her as this sort of, overly confident or, sexually confident young woman. But now she's in a different scenario because different things are going to work with or not work with this particular person. And it's absolutely movingly beautiful and wonderful. Of course, I can't remember which episode or which series.
That's fine. I haven't seen that. Sounds wonderful. And presumably that would have been that sort of planned out.
Yeah, and also
as you were just saying
written
there.
by a disabled writer
Exactly.
as well.
So
and then they would have worked really closely with the actor to, and they would also, and I should have said this perhaps from the start, they would have had an intimacy coordinator.
Yeah.
Who that's a term that is becoming so common in the film industry, film and television industries at the moment. And it's really just best practice to always have one. And that's someone who, so like Bridgerton would 100% have one.
Yeah.
And they just make sure that everyone is comfortable, that everyone is protected, that everyone is not being made to say yes to things that they actually don't feel comfortable with.
And then it's planned out. And
that there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of time given, that the crew are comfortable, that, that there's absolutely no possibility of embarrassment or things going wrong or someone feeling like they're being harassed, all of those things which historically have happened. Having intimacy coordinators really eradicates all of that, and I just think they're wonderful and necessary. I also think accessibility coordinators are equally wonderful and necessary, and that is a new role which has sort of exploded in the last 3 years. Really championed by an organisation called DANK, who are this fabulous collaboration of disabled actors, writers, presenters, producers, artists, dancers, models. Their main hub is in Manchester, but they do work all over the country. Dank and Triple C, and they, with I think the writer Jack Thorne and with the BBC and Channel 4 have really been, and ITV, pushing and championing this pathway of trying to get disabled people trained as accessibility coordinators so that someone with the lived experience of disability can come to a set, they would look at the script, they would look at, everything that the actors, whether they're disabled or not, would, everything from the architecture to the setting, to the toilets, to the lunches, to the travel, to the accommodation, to the hair and makeup, the clothes, every single element. And then they would also do that for the crew, because assumably you would have a couple of people on the crew who have disabilities, whether they require access needs or not. So they would do a real deep dive before anyone even sets foot or wheel on set. They would do a complete deep dive into all of that. And then they would also be able to script advise, like I was doing at Grange Hill years ago, that, that role would now not fall to the actor. It would fall to the accessibility coordinator, who would work with the actor and say, how can we make this more real? How can we let this story live and breathe? How can we feed your experiences as a person into the character and make the script better?
So that's you saying that's in the last few years that's become
and there's a proper training course now, and I know that there are 12 who are working in the UK at the moment, and I think more are being trained.
Well, hopefully then it only takes that one sort of seismic shift for it to then become an industry norm, doesn't it? So that's actually a really nice positive thing to hear, that the industry is moving in the right direction, however fast or slow it might be. But
on all fronts, to some degree. So I was lucky enough to go to a screening on Monday. My lovely friend Melissa Johns invited me to a screening at BAFTA of Netflix's newest show, which is called Toxic Town. It literally came out yesterday.
Right, okay.
And it tells the story of a group of mothers in Corby during the 90s who were all breathing in this really toxic dust. And so then there were a huge group of children born with limb differences or other disabilities, or some of them didn't even live past a year because of this. But it was really hard to prove. Anyway, I don't want to ruin the show for you. But it's Jodie Whittaker, Robert Carlyle, Amy Lou Wood. She's absolutely brilliant. And it's got Eloise from Bridgerton, who is, of course, Claudia Jessie. It's just got a really gorgeous, relatable, familiar cast. And they had so many kids in it with limb differences. And I know that the charity Reach, which is a charity for children with upper limb differences, really supported them and worked with them. Because you're casting for particularly the main little boy in it, the show goes over a time period of 12 years. So you had to cast different children with similar looking limb differences at different points in their life, and they've got to be able to act and they've got to look alike and all of these things. So it was absolutely phenomenal, the care and the love and the dedication that went into it. And yes, in the discussion they talked about, the experience of having an accessibility coordinator on set, and actually that everyone, regardless of who you are, how long you've been in the industry, so Robert Carlyle, are asked, do you have any access requirements? And it could be something like, well, actually I've got a really bad back, so if I could sit down for half an hour, or if I could go back to my dressing room and lie down when I'm not being used, rather than wait in the canteen, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Being able to say that rather than thinking, right, I'm going to have to manage my pain on my own, or do you know what I mean? Just
what we were saying before,
thing.
of not wanting to then be judged as somebody
who's burdening everyone.
Yeah, burdening everyone. But swapping it the other way around. That's something that at the studio, John Kelly, on the last episode, he introduced to us was access riders for musicians that we now send out. And it's just, it takes the burden off of the person who's then coming in to our studio and who might have gone through many, many years of, oh no, I won't mention it. And then it's your choice then if you want to mention it or not.
Yes, completely. But also this is a completely accessible studio, isn't it?
Yes. Well, we like to think so. We try, everything is done with access in mind.
Yes, and that's very obvious from the moment you get here, really.
We learned very quick that there's no such thing as a completely accessible space.
No, that's true.
That doesn't exist, but to keep it on the
it's
forefront.
An ideology of wanting to be inclusive.
I think so many people and businesses end up getting a bit nervous about whether they can do it right or wrong. And we learned very quickly is just ask everyone and say, get the opinions of our community, people who are coming in and out. It was, again, John, only because he's been here for John Kelly, who's been here for quite a long time, when we got our new hoist fitted in the bathroom, and he came in and gave it a test run and said, no, it's brilliant, love it. And then he did notice our pedal bin.
Right.
So he said that it was something like 90% of disabled toilets in the UK have a pedal bin. Meaning that people who...
Yeah, so then you can't access it. Yeah,
so it's like, what's the point in going to all that effort? And then I can't actually use my legs, so I can't use the bin. So which is why we have an automatic bin. And that was through having that conversation with John and saying, brilliant. And then we change our protocols and we just try and keep up to date. We were very proud. We came runner-up as for an accessibility award last year, a national one.
Amazing.
And we lost out to Legoland. We were really annoyed. And the funny thing is,
good for Legoland, I would say.
Great for Legoland. They're a little bit bigger of a business than our little independent studio in Morden. But we have, when you come into the office, we have a Lego set of the entire building, Metronome and Crown Lane, for visually impaired people, and it's all done with Braille, so then you can run your finger through the whole building basically and have a
amazing.
And then we got back after coming second to Lego, and we've got smash it, anyway, right.
So I was just going to tell you the other experience that I've had, which came years later, and this is where actually, if I'd had an accessibility coordinator, things would have been very different. But I was working for a show called Doctors, which is now, I think, no longer on air. But it was, it's like easy watching, lunchtime, a favourite show of people who were sort of at home between 12 and 1 or whatever. And I was a character in that for about 6 weeks. And at my audition, the casting director said to me, they would love to speak to you about your experiences. I was playing a nurse, obviously with one hand. you know, the character is based on a real person, but they would love to talk to you in some depth and see what your thoughts are on the scripts. And I said, absolutely great. Yeah. They didn't send me any of the scripts. So I thought, well, okay, fine. Maybe they didn't have any questions, you know. And I got there and I read the scripts and every single scene that my character was in, Penny, the character, was in, someone had an issue with her. So it was like someone was complaining in the hospital that they didn't want her to, I don't know, change their son's dressing, or someone didn't believe that she could do it. And I understand you have to show that reality, but you only need, you know, audiences do have a memory. You only need to show it once. You don't need to show it in every single scene. So I then had to go in to the producer on the second day with armfuls of scripts and say, this is not, you know, I volunteered in a hospital. This is just not how it would. Yeah. Okay, I'm not a nurse. And I'm not saying there wouldn't be some pushback from some people, but not every
like
single person
every single
has
moment,
an issue every single day.
Yeah.
And they were just very cold and very kind of, well, that's your experience and this is the person's. And another thing they wanted me to do was to try and high five someone, and the person, this is someone I've not met before, the person would go to high five me and then I would like raise my elbow and high five them with my elbow. Yeah. And I just think, first of all, that, you know, I'm a grown woman, I don't want to be high fiving anyone unless I'm playing beach volleyball. Secondly, why on earth would anyone do that? If you're trying to make friends with your colleagues on the first day, you're not going to high five them with your arm. It's just it's too. Maybe in the pub after you've known them for a couple of weeks, it's just too weird on the first day. And what's the point of it? Who is the joke on or for? Yeah, completely unnecessary.
And what was the reaction to that then?
No, they didn't. They just didn't really want to do anything. But then. And so actually what happened is the cast rallied around me very quickly and said, we are so uncomfortable with these scripts, like, because they were having to say all of this stuff to me. Yeah. And they said, we've all complained before you got here. So I didn't know I was even walking into that. Yeah. But yeah, and so they were really, really, you know, just welcoming and really had my back and were amazing.
Oh, nice.
And then really early on, I turned up to set and I walked into the kitchen and, you know, it was meant to be the kitchen of my home. And there was all of this equipment in there. And I just thought, okay, whatever, fine. And the director turned around to me and he said, so how does this work? And I said, oh, I don't know. What is it? And he said, it's a bread slicer. And I said, I don't know. I've never used a bread slicer. He said, don't you have one at home? And I said, no. And he said, but what do you... And I just looked at him and I said, I buy sliced bread. And he went, oh, right. And then we spent an hour just getting rid of all of this stuff that had been that someone had thought, oh, let's show everyone that she's disabled by getting loads of bread slicers. And, well, okay, or just talk to me the day before. If you want me to cut a bit of bread, I'll just show you how I cut bread. You don't need to have a load of machinery that's... And so if we'd had an accessibility coordinator, that could have been ironed out weeks before I even got on set, all the problems with the script. So what would happen is we kind of ignored the producers in the end, and the directors would just be working with me and all of the other actors to change the script in the moment. Yeah. Which is fine, but it's quite a big ask. Yeah. Every scene you're in, pretty much, is having to be rewritten-ish on the spot. Yeah. And as a consequence of that, I just felt like my acting was not great because it was just... I mean, it wasn't dreadful. No one would have said, God, why on earth have they cast her? But it just wasn't...
But then you're not having the same lead-in time as you normally would to prepare for a role if it's then changing... so dramatically, or you know, on the day even sometimes, you know. I
mean, there's an element of you have to be flexible when you're an actor. So, to a degree, I'm prepared for that. But I suppose I more felt like I felt offended by the script, and I felt like everything I've worked for since I refused to wear a prosthetic at drama school, since I put my foot down at Grange Hill, which had been 12 years earlier, since my time on CBeebies, where I also didn't wear a prosthetic and, faced down a press campaign, all of that is going to get undone by someone's bad script.
Yeah.
And it's not intentionally bad. They weren't doing it to be, they thought they were being educational and informative.
Yeah.
And this is how hard it can be when you're a nurse with one hand. Okay.
Presumably. Yeah.
And I'm not a nurse, and I'm sure there are nurses with one hand, and I'm sure it is tough on some days.
Yeah.
On other days, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a bad day every day.
Yeah.
So, and also, even if it is incredibly hard to become a nurse with one hand, and, I don't doubt the ableism or prejudice or just, barriers that you've had to overcome, you don't then want to be showing that in telly all of the time. You only need to show it once.
Yeah.
And then you want to be moving on, because portraying disability constantly in the negative is just exhausting. And why? We don't do that with other diversities.
Yeah.
You wouldn't continually, you might have a show about, one particular thing that's difficult about, that identity or that diversity, but not every single show.
Yeah, it's quite tiring, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. I wanted to quickly move on and sort of tie in again with our part one. And I wanted to ask the same question to you as I did in the other episode to John and Jackie, which is, I kind of warned you, it is very cliche,
Go ahead.
but hopefully it'll give us a nice insight, which is talking about magic wand theory. If you could have a magic wand and make anything happen. And it's about how you'd like to see the industry change, looking into the future, imagine 5 years down the line, that kind of thing. What are the things that you think still exist now that you really hope there's meaningful change in when it comes to accessibility within your industry?
I think there are two different sides of it. In terms of accessibility, I would say just get an access coordinator.
Yeah.
Because they will amp up the accessibility awareness very organically. And that sort of permits people to then have the confidence to work with disabled crew and, likewise work with disabled talent. And, the two reflect off each other. So the more disabled people you have backstage, as it were, or behind the camera, the better it is for everyone in front of the camera. And, vice versa. You can't really have one without the other.
Yeah.
So that's something, and of course, that is just that awareness training of, accessible venues or accommodation, travel, all the things. It's all of the things. I particularly am excited, actually, for the shift that is happening in terms of authentic storytelling and giving disabled writers and actors agency over our lives and over our stories. My worry, I think, particularly with limb difference, is that there is still this age-old argument, particularly in big blockbuster Hollywood films where they only want A-listers, is that, we don't know anyone who's got one hand, so we're just going to CGI. Do you know what I mean? It's that whole, and I just, I've seen two massive films, even in the last 6 months, where a main character lost a limb. Yeah. And then you've just got someone really famous pretending to have one hand and everyone knows it's not real.
Yeah.
I mean, every major streamer has done it in the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Whether it's a show about pirates, whether it's a show about, I don't know, someone running away from home, whether it's a show about a stripper, there's just this this laziness, actually, and almost like it's an excuse.
Yeah.
We don't have to invest in disabled talent because that'll be too exhausting. And also we don't really trust you. We don't really want you on our screen.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is take someone very pretty and beautiful and, palatable to our audience and make them look disabled.
Yeah.
And everyone knows it's a lie, so it's okay.
Because I guess that's existed forever. As long as film and television has been around, there's always been sort of misrepresentation in that way, that they've always sort of tricked and sort of visual effects, CGI these days. It's always been the case, hasn't it? And you would have thought that it would have finally started moving into the right direction.
Well, and I think it is in indie films, and more so in TV as well. But yeah, there's still there's still a bit of a mountain to climb with that one in terms of the awareness and people understanding that, and actually people having the grace and confidence to trust disabled actors, or maybe it's true for actors with lots of differences, but I'm just very uncomfortable with the way that is panning out.
Do you feel like that, if anything, it might even be more difficult to get to that point that you're saying because of the ease of CGI
of technology
and how simple it is these days? Not simple, but achievable, almost believably achievable visually to create that in post. That it's maybe even more of an easy route for producers to say, oh yeah, we'll go down that route. It
is, but then you miss out on the truth of the story.
Oh, 100%.
And it's very obvious, and actually it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And
so you're going to end up with, I'm just thinking, of a few different shows that I've seen where, a well-known actress or actor loses their hand very quickly at the beginning through an accident, and that sort of is the catalyst for the story. Yeah. But actually, what you could have just done is cast someone with one hand and CGI'd a hand on.
Yeah, do it the other way around.
Yeah, do it the other way around, because then you get the truth, and then you get the... one show I'm thinking of in particular, I won't name it, but the character then has a prosthetic hand for the rest of the show, and it's not used ever.
Yeah.
She's in a scene where she's fighting for her life, and you think, well, these prosthetics are heavy.
Yeah.
You could have clocked someone round the head. Do you know what I mean? Or she could have blocked a knife with it, or hidden drugs in it. There are so many, but no one thinks of that because that's not their lived experience. They just go, oh, well, we've dealt with, we've dealt with the arm, we've dealt with the hand.
Yeah,
it's like you haven't.
You've not
even begun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in terms of positive representation and portrayal, authentic storytelling, I can highly recommend Toxic Town on Netflix.
Okay.
And I also recently saw the brilliant Adam Pearson. I don't know if you know Adam. He's a Croydon lad. And he is in a show called A Different Man with... Oh my God, am I going to get this actor's name right? Sebastian Stan.
Nice, well done.
Yes, thank you. Sebastian Stan's all right in it. Adam is bloody amazing in it. And it's all about... So the way Adam's disability manifests is that his face is affected by it. And Sebastian Stan starts off with the same disability as Adam, and then goes through this, almost kind of like The Substance, then goes through this procedure where the disability magically disappears so he can have a better life. And he kind of does for a while. And then some weird stuff happens. I mean, anyone who is a fan of theatre or student film or anything like that should definitely see this, because it's just... It's such a clever kind of circular way of storytelling. So he falls in love with his neighbour, and she kind of won't entertain dating him because of the way he looks. And then after he has this, you know, kind of magical transformation, he lies and pretends to be someone else and says that that person is dead. And the neighbour then writes a play about him thinking that he's dead.
Oh, wow.
And then tries to find actors with the same facial disability to play him. And he's like, but it's me. But obviously it's not him anymore.
Yeah.
So then he gets a mask to try and, I mean, it's just crazy.
Oh, that sounds brilliant.
And then Adam rocks up, who the kind of mask is based on. And he's like the happy-go-lucky, the person that Sebastian Stan's trying to be.
Yeah.
And he hasn't had the surgery. He hasn't had the procedure. He's just embraced life.
Yeah.
And he's just, you know, glowing and funny and like the most charming nemesis you've ever encountered.
Yeah.
And everything then starts to unravel. But it's so carefully and cleverly executed. It's really brilliant.
Oh, nice. That sounds great.
Yes. And there are others. There are, you know, some really, really strong, lovely, other things coming through at the moment, actually. And I think it will happen the same way that it's happened for, you know, kind of championing women's stories in film. You know, if you look at this film awards season, you know, Demi Moore, Pamela Anderson in The Last Showgirl, you know, just, that's like the role of a lifetime. It's absolutely beautiful. Nicole Kidman's just on fire all the time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So we are Reese Witherspoon, you know, these women who are phenomenal in their own right and have had careers, but are now kind of twisting the dial, you know, and taking control and making work or being offered work or creating work that is very female focused and or you know, or just in more inclusive of narratives beyond being someone's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think if you take that back to the sort of the world of disability in the industry, from everything that you said about having that coordinator is taking it away from somebody who has zero lived experience, which, you know, how can you ever really truly represent it, to giving it into the hands of people who that is their day-to-day and their life and everything they've ever been through. So the authenticity just shines through and it's a much more pleasant experience for everyone then, isn't it? Thank you very much for sharing all this amazing stuff. We're sort of fast approaching the end of our podcast now. There's no getting out of this next part.
Okay.
I do apologise.
That's okay, go on.
But now every guest that comes on, we have the Crown Lane questionnaire.
Oh my God, okay.
We're not going to let you leave without doing it.
Okay, I'll try my best.
It's a
Friday afternoon and my brain is frazzled, but yes.
And the thing you're not going to like about it is it was a very strict rule on no dilly-dallying.
Oh, so it's quick fire, okay.
It's quick fire.
Okay,
so that means
I'll
at the end of it, you regret every single answer that you give.
I'm already regretting it. Okay.
Okay, before we finish, are you ready, Kerry, for the Crown Lane questionnaire?
Not at all.
No, not at all. No.
Here we go.
Okay, first question.
Yeah.
Which is the best format to listen to music to? And by that I mean, for you, what's your favourite? Listening to vinyl or a cassette or a CD, streaming online? What's the best?
For me, it's the radio, actually. I just have the radio on in the car all the time.
Radio.
Yeah. I mean, I could play music at home and that would be, you know, that would be streamed, I suppose.
Yeah.
But often I have the radio on.
Nice. Some of these questions they're mainly aimed at musicians. Obviously, there's a music podcast, but it kind of works here.
I do play the tambourine.
Which grade are you on tambourine?
Grade tambourine.
Oh yeah, grade T. Nice. Yeah. Question 2: do you prefer being in the studio setting, or do you prefer being sort of live on stage? So you can think about that in your acting world as well.
Oh, two very different disciplines.
Yeah.
I think the studio gives the impression of being more relaxed, but actually it can still be quite intense.
Yeah.
Because obviously you haven't got an audience and if you're doing a radio play or an audiobook, you're sat down, but it can still be very, very fast.
Yeah.
I love them both in different ways.
Okay. Cop out answer. The best gig that you've ever been to?
Well, that would have been Glastonbury in the 90s when I think I went 3 times and I probably had a ticket once. And the rest of the time I just... I think my boyfriend and I climbed a fence.
Really?
Yeah, at one point. And another time, I think I just smiled at a guy who had a fake stamp thing and then got in that way. And I just, I didn't really have any particular band I wanted to see, but just the atmosphere.
Just being there, isn't it?
Yeah, and I remember seeing PJ Harvey on stage in like this kind of shimmery mermaid thing and bright pink massive stilettos, just stomping up and down and thinking, I love her, I want to be her.
Yeah.
And it was just made up of moments like that, of kind of like sunlit bliss and harmony and craziness and queuing for chips, and then all of the years when there was the mud, and you were just sliding around and losing your shoes and tents getting stolen and all of it really.
The beautiful chaos.
Yes.
That is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so that's the best gig that you've been to. The next question, strange one, the best gig that you've never been to. So thinking about historically or even modern ones, you really would have loved to have been there. Oh, gosh.
I mean... Historically, I mean, there's probably, I don't know. There's probably absolutely thousands. I don't know. I would have loved to have seen Madonna in the 80s.
Oh, there you go.
And then more recently, we tried to get tickets to Sabrina Carpenter. So.
Oh, right, okay. I thought you were going to say eras. I thought you were going to say Taylor.
Well, I would have loved to have been, but actually my daughter wasn't. She's actually not a Swiftie. So,
right, okay. Sabrina.
Yeah. Yes, she's all about Sabrina. Yeah.
Nice. Next question. Your favourite instrument to listen to, if it was in the same room as you, someone playing it? Favourite sound?
Well, I mean, obviously guitar is really lovely, like on a campsite, if people are kind of singing. But I think my favourite instrument...
You can tell you're a tambourine player.
Ever is a harp. I'd just love to be in a room with a harp.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Recorder, absolutely not. Get out.
Okay, hang on. Save it. Next question. What's your least favourite instrument to listen to?
Recorder played by a child.
Yeah. Or it could be worse, is where you have a group of 30 kids all learning at the same time.
Or even 30 men. I don't care. I don't want to hear 30 recorders.
Yeah, I mean, even when you get to the top peak level, it's pretty
awful.
Yeah. Next question. Which album is the best to give to someone as a gift?
Oh, the best to give to... I don't know if I've given any albums to people recently.
You don't really do that anymore, do you?
No.
It doesn't exist anymore.
No, I mean, people used to make you mixtapes.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful gift to have. And or like even on a CD, I've got friends who've done that and it's so thoughtful and lovely. I'm just going to celebrate a brilliant young musician who is up and coming at the moment, and I love all of her songs, and that's Lola Young.
Yes.
I think most well known for Messy, but her album is called, I think it's called This Isn't Meant For You Anyway, or This Wasn't Meant For You Anyway.
Yeah.
And I just love that concept, and I love her energy. And she's a South Londoner, and she's just unique and fabulous and hardworking and amazing.
Yeah.
So I would give her album.
Nice. And the last question, again, is kind of music based. We can change it to the arts.
No, go on. What is it?
Well, it's sum up what music means to you in one sentence.
Okay. Well, as someone who's not a musician, I still think music is really vitally important because it's such a mood lifter, isn't it? And it can be so... I mean, filmic music can be, absolutely everything. My daughter's named Amelie because I fell so in love with that film.
Yeah.
And probably 50% of that is because of the music.
Yeah.
That score is just so... I don't know. It's like kind of ethereal, and then it's fun, and then it's like you're in Paris, and it's romantic, and it's sad, and it's beautiful. So I grew up with a mum who was a dance teacher, so there was always different piano music going on in the house, or I've danced most of my childhood, so I can actually hear some music.
Yeah, I can hear. I don't know.
It's really funny.
That's the problem
I
with
don't know where
recording in
that's
a
come
recording studio, I think.
No, I just think it's a mood changer, isn't it? And it can be so soothing and so life affirming, and different songs can really recreate different moments in your life or different memories. So I absolutely love music. I don't know if I've answered the question.
That was quite a long sentence, but a very good one, and I enjoyed it. That's the end. That's the end of the questionnaire. Thanks very much.
That's the end of it. Okay.
That's the end of it. And we're coming up to the end of our podcast now. We just do our final, very quick recommendations. You really kind of did include your recommendations in the shows that you were talking about.
Yeah. What else could I recommend?
Was there anything else you wanted to recommend?
So there were those two shows, Toxic Town and A Different Man. Pamela Anderson in The Last Showgirl, because it's just magnifique. And then, what am I reading at the moment? I've just recently read a really just cool and contemporary and uplifting and moving book by an author called Coco Mellors. Mm-hmm. And the book is called Blue Sisters. So I would recommend that for anyone pretty much. In terms of children's books, I'd recommend all of my own.
Oh, fantastic. And where can we find those children's books?
Waterstones, your local independent bookshop, libraries, and of course, the river.
The big one. Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, I had to say it. Well, thank you for that. My recommendation is that all of last week we filmed our Crown Lane Live Season 2, and they will be coming up on YouTube very soon. So please do check out our beautiful sessions that we had in the studio and in Metronome. Have a look at them.
I don't know what those are. Quickly tell me what those are. Is it musicians performing in your...
Yeah, I'm gonna break the fourth wall.
Oh, okay.
This episode's coming out in April.
Oh, okay, great.
So, So we haven't actually done them yet, but please come along to them.
I will. I'll be in the background.
For the listeners, they've already happened.
Yeah, okay. Amazing.
But they will be. For you guys listening, they'll be coming onto YouTube soon. But we'll get you along.
Oh, in that case, I've got one more thing to plug then. This is coming out in April. So I am starting a literary festival in Crystal Palace and Penge. It's called Stories by the Lake. It's happening on Saturday, the 10th of May at Brown and Green Cafe in Crystal Palace Park. It's a gorgeous, inclusive, accessible event space. We've got 7 different authors throughout the day, children's events and adult events in the evening. Tickets are on Eventbrite, Stories by the Lake.
Can I bring my children?
Yes, you can. You'll have to buy tickets for them, but yes, you can.
Well, no, we know someone on the inside. We'll be all right.
Yes.
Well, we might jump over the fence like you did at Glastonbury, maybe.
I don't think there is a fence.
I'll give a nice little smile to someone.
Yes,
I'll do all of your tactics.
Amazing.
Right, that's it. At the next episode, John Merriman will be back finally. But other than that, thank you so much, Kerry. Thanks for coming in.
It's been lovely. Thank you for having me.
It's been wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you for listening, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.